I'm Bob Grove, and I'm speaking with Kristan Chamberlain, Rachel Jefferson, Eslun Tucker, and Richard Mabion about environmental justice. A big part of environmental justice is making sure that environmental impacts are equitably distributed. Unfortunately, environmental impacts are often disproportionately affecting communities of color. Lots of studies show that Black and Hispanic communities are exposed to greater air pollution, toxic waste sites, landfills, lead poisoning, feedlots, factory farms, and all those other industrial complexes that damage their health and property values. 70% of all contaminated waste sites in our country are located in low-income neighborhoods. So what are the environmental impacts that our communities struggle with here in Kansas City? Eslun, would you like to start?
Sure. So I can recall that in December when a reporter asked the infectious disease doctor, Paul Farmer, who's been recognized for his global health work, um, um, if he thought that it was true that coronavirus doesn't discriminate. And he responded, take a meat packing plant or a prison or a crowded slum somewhere or a reservation, that it's absurd to claim that the risk is the same there as it is in a leafy suburb where people have big homes that they're residing in and can keep themselves isolated safely. Because of racial disparities, vulnerable Black and marginalized communities uh, also face an even greater risk from climate change and environmental pollution. I'm sure we can all remember the residents of New Orleans' Ninth Ward. Mr. Mabion mentioned it just a moment ago when Hurricane Katrina hit, or the water lead contamination in Flint, Michigan, or I believe it was 1977, the Brush Creek flood on Kansas City, Missouri's east side. And again, countless other, examples, around the country in communities where chemical plants are put close to where people are residing. And in each of those instances, Black communities receive disproportionate treatment because of the racial wealth gap, and segregation and poor housing and lack of investment and infrastructure in their neighborhoods. They're more vulnerable and suffer greater loss. But there's also good news, and that is when an effort was started in Kansas City, Kansas. I want to say back in the early, 90s, that residents of Kansas City, Kansas, formed some coalitions to block the Brown and Ferris landfill that was planned for the Condero area. But even now, more recently in Kansas City, Missouri's 3rd District, an effort was started to place a compressed natural gas facility without public comment within 2 blocks of where families are living. And despite the need for neighborhoods in that part of town to attract investment for better housing, food, and services. And so that means that we need to continue to wage the fight to make it not be the case where communities like this are chosen as sites for putting polluting enterprises, and make it more appealing as places where people want to live, work, and play.
Rachel, what about your neighborhood, the region you cover, environmental impacts? What's happening over there? You're muted, Rachel.
Thank you, Bob. Trying to be a good participant by keeping myself on mute. Yeah, I'd say some of the impacts that we see are going to be around the rail yards and the intermodal that we have here in KCK. Richard was a big part of doing some studies in the Argentine neighborhood around the impacts of the pollution, diesel health pollution off those rail yards, and we continue that work going forward. We also are co-located near the Fairfax Industrial Association. And so we see a lot of trucking coming through our neighborhood, being off of 7th Street, which is also a highway. So we see a lot of trucks come through our neighborhood, and we would be interested in doing some truck counting to get an idea of how deep that impact actually goes. We also do, as you mentioned, we do have a former sanitary landfill in our community, which is the John Garland Park landfill, which accepted waste in the early 90s and has now been turned into a community park. So some of the things that you and Eslun have mentioned are definitely factors contributing to our environmental justice health here in Northeast KCK.
It's interesting. Kristan, I mean, you're more of a service provider throughout these communities. I mean, you're transporting compost to landfill someplace for processing. What kind of placements are you being exposed to?
Yeah, it's we've looked more at some of the global climate issues, like the increased average temperatures and how that will impact neighborhoods like that. We are actually going into those neighborhoods very deliberately and trying to build relationships, community relationships to help with the composting. You bring it back into the community and you're offsetting a lot of the contamination runoff, things like that. So our goal is to be kind of partnering with the communities themselves, schools in particular, so that we can both educate about issues of justice, but also try to mitigate the effects through compost. That's our goal. So it's both, yeah.
So do you find transitioning to compost kind of helps take the pressure off these landfills? People that are home composting or otherwise?
It should. Right now, I mean, nationally, we're only composting 5% of food waste. So statistics say that, you know, up to what is 55, I think 55, 60% of what goes into those landfills is compostable. So it really, the diversion is really, really important to solving the problem.
Richard, and I know as an advocate, this is a big issue for you.
Oh yeah, I was going to say this is my cup of tea here. You know, I think, especially because we're talking about environmental justice, whatever is going on, we need to empower people. And individual responsibility is the key to anything that we're facing in this country. I'm not going to equity. You can't have equity when you're dealing with poor people and people who are of some kinds of means. And so to sit up and try to even address it, as far as I'm concerned, out of line. The various programs that I've been on, you've heard my name mentioned on a couple of them here, as far as the diesel effect of the trains and the trucks and everything that's going on around our area. You realize that if we don't find a way to get our future generations, K through 12, to fall in love with science and technology, by the time they become adults, they'll be unemployable. And as it is right now, our school systems are so poor. The new president of Kansas City, Kansas Community College did a study and found out that 50% of the population in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, does not have a high school graduation diploma or equivalency. 50%. That tells me that I got children in the future generation that are being raised with people who don't have a high school education, which means the responsibility for preparing them for a future is going to have to come somewhere intentionally from the city itself. Right now, that we're not focused on that. Right now, we're doing things that are make the environment clean, but we're not dealing with the fact that we have another step that needs to be reached, and that's the work that I'm engaged in, is creating that climate change consciousness.
It's great. When we talk about environment, go ahead,
I was going to
Kristan.
make a comment on to follow up on Richard's comment. I think the schools now, I mean, we've been called by school districts, the Hickman Mills School District as a whole, they were supposed to start composting with us in December, but I think they have a sustainability manager, I think the schools are a tremendous and positive source of educating the people. So I know people aren't making it all the way through their education. At the same time, the elementary schools have been tremendous partners for us. The kids are engaged and active, and they want to bring this home. They want to start composting at home now that they've learned about it at school. So it's a positive place to start, I think.
If I can make a, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can make a comment too, I'm so glad that Richard brought that up about education and training. It is such an important part of the equation to me in equity, and to prepare people for those for the green economy, and to take advantage of higher paying jobs that are out there. Right now, solar and wind are two of the fastest growing sectors, and hopefully that will continue to be the case, along with other types of work that'll be involved across the board in us transitioning to a clean energy future. And so one of the things that I would like to do is see that schools start integrating into their curriculum, like in their tracks for school to work programs, programs that are designed around all of the different types of jobs that students can walk out the door with, or that they can use towards their college degrees as well. So we definitely need to tackle it from that front as well, to help educate people, to help put money in people's pockets.
It's interesting. I mean, many of you are hitting on the educational component and educating our young people for the next generation of advocates that are going to have to stand up against these, these environmental impacts that are affecting our poor. So it sounds like there's a two-pronged approach here. I mean, obviously education at the young level to create that grassroots movement that can, oppose this inequity and bringing people to the table. But then, the flip side of that is looking at the policy level in our cities and stuff, taking action to help the poor and make sure that they're making good choices with the equitable distribution of these bad environmental impacts. So I'm Bob Grove, and we're talking about environmental justice. When we return, we're going to look at access to sustainable systems.